Hello everyone, welcome back to Kiara's Corner, or welcome to if you're new. Today, I'm excited about this video. Today, we're going to go over some books I've read in the last 4 months. So with me now working full time, go me, I have a lot more time to listen to audiobooks. I've already been listening to audiobooks pretty much since I moved. It's a great way to pass time when I'm waiting for the bus. But anyway, I'm going to go over the books I read from January to April because that's a third of the year. After that, I might do monthly wrap ups. I'm not sure yet, especially because my May my May reading has already been like half of what I read the first 4 months of the year. So it's probably going to be monthly wrap ups. But for today, I'm going to try and go through all 21 books that I read through January to April and give it just like I'm hoping it's not too long. I'm almost positive it's going to be a pretty long video, but we're going to hope it's not. Okay. I'll try to make things quick, succinct. I've got some notes, so we're set to go. So I guess with all that being said, let's do a January to April reading wrap up. We start with January. In January, I read 6 books, with 2 of them being rereads. I'd already read them before, but I wanted to reread them. But the first book I read in January was Briarheart by Mercedes Lackey. So this is a YA fantasy. The basis of this book is that Aurora, aka Sleeping Beauty, has an older sister to protect her instead of Aurora going to the fairies in the woods, kind of. And it's a different world, it's a different magic setup. So, really, it's. Miriam is our main character. She is Aurora's half sister. Miriam's mom is the same as Aurora's, but Miriam's dad died. And then Miriam's mom married the king, and then they had Aurora. So Aurora is a baby. We get the dark. It's not Maleficent in the book, but it's an evil fae of sorts. She puts a curse on Aurora, and then Miriam basically is the one to protect, along with a bunch of other people that I can't remember. I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars. Here were my main issues with this, okay? The chapters were way too long. The first chapter, I think it was almost 20 pages. It was started on page 5 and it went to page 26. Okay, it was 21 pages. That's way too long, especially for a YA fantasy. So I actually started this in December. Me and my best friend, we went to Chapters and we saw that these books were $6. They were on sale. And we were very intrigued by the story, like the summary, the plot, but then we were both severely disappointed. We both read them over our Christmas breaks, and I started mine like the first day of my Christmas break, and then didn't touch it until I was flying back to Winnipeg. So the long chapters was a real turnoff. It's almost 400 pages, which is way too long for this book. And it felt like an exposition book. It felt very world building, which was fine, but it also felt like nothing was happening. I didn't care about the characters at all. The other thing is, like, maybe I was just too old to read this. They're like 15-year-olds, and maybe if I was younger and I'd read this, I would like it more. I just didn't like it, and my best friend didn't like it. It felt slow but fast, but also nothing was happening but so much. I don't know, like, it was just not good. Like, maybe if I was younger, I would like it, but for me, it was a no. So that is Briarheart. The next book I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is a contemporary romance. This follows January. She is a romance author and is in a bit of a writer's slump, writer's block, can't really get anything going. And it did not help that she is dealing with her father's death and the secrets that came out after his death. So she goes to the small town in Michigan and she stays at, basically she's there to pack up a house that her dad had owned that she didn't know about. And who do you know but the next door neighbor who's renting the house is her college rival Gus. And Gus is a literary fiction author who is also going through writer's block. So in the summer that they're both there, they decide to swap genres. So Gus writes a romance and January writes a lit fic. And the bet is that whoever can get their book published first, then the other one has to write a good review for the book. And we follow that. I loved this book. Okay, this was my first Emily Henry read. I could not get enough of it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm going to tell you right now, I have basically no 5 stars. Like, a book has to fully change my life for it to be 5 stars. This one was close. Honestly, it might be a 4.75 if I'm being completely honest, but at the time it was a 4.5. It's just so good. Emily Henry knows how to write banter really well. She knows how to write a dynamic really well. It was just so good. I love Gus and January. They're so fun. The small town was fun. It was just so good. It was it's my first Emily Henry book that I read. It's my favorite, which I think is a little bit of an unpopular opinion. But what can I say? There was like 1, maybe 2 smut scenes, but they weren't long and they weren't graphic at all, which I am here for. I don't love smut. I can get through it, but it's a lot of like, okay. Sometimes this felt not super smutty, and that's a plus. So would highly recommend Beach Read and the other Emily Henry books, which I will talk about later, but let's move on. The next book I read was a Kindle Unlimited read, and that is Thrown in the Dark by A.K. Caggiano. So this is the first of the Villains and Virtues trilogy, which is a Kindle Unlimited series. It is a romantasy. And so we follow Damien. He is a half demon, half human. His dad is a demon and his mom was a human. And so this means that he is a villain and that he is evil. And he reminds the reader of this often, and he has to remind himself of this often, but because really he's not a villain. He's not evil, okay? And we have who I call Emma. Her full name is this, which I would pronounce Amelie, but then the name she goes by for pretty much the entire book is this, which then should be pronounced Amma, but I don't want to pronounce Amma. I want to say Emma, so I'm going to say Emma. Emma is a thief who ends up being a thorn in Damien's side because she interferes on this big quest that he's doing, and she's forced then to tag along with him. And it's romantasy, so you can kind of guess what happens. So this was great. This is a 4-star read for sure. I found out about the series through Carrie Can Read. I love her videos. She is one of the booktubers that got me kind of back into reading a lot. Her and then Lexi are the kind of the two that got me back into reading. But it was so good. It is the slowest of slow burns. Okay, nothing happens in the first book. I'm pretty sure they don't kiss. I'm pretty sure like the most we get is maybe a hug and maybe like some hand hold. I don't think that there's hand holding. Then there's maybe like a brush of the arm that gets Damien like, whoop, what's happening? Maybe I think that's really about it. And I'm reading the second one right now. And again, very little is happening. I'm like 90% of the way through. There's only been like one-ish thing happened, but even that is questionable. But that all to say, if you love a slow burn, this is for you 100%. Their banter is hilarious. It is so good. Damien has this little sidekick who's an imp who lives in the infernal plane, which is not our plane, but the plane where like demons and things are from. And his name is Kaz, and he's hilarious because he hates Emma with a passion, like hates Emma. And you just see Emma like try to win this imp over. It's so funny, but it's just really good. It does sometimes feel like it's a little bit of a drag. They go on a bunch of little side quests, it feels like, which I'm here for. Like the side quests are usually pretty fun and they bring about something different, but it sometimes feels like it can drag. But yeah, would definitely recommend the at least the first book. I've heard that the third book is I'm pretty much almost done the second book and I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. So I don't know. We'll see. I will finish the series maybe in a couple of months. It'll come up in a wrap up, but for now, Thrown in the Dark would definitely recommend. This one, you can maybe stop after that if you like wanted to. It's kind of an open-ended ending that if you like it could end if you wanted it to, but it definitely should be continued kind of deal. But anyways, that's Thrown in the Dark. Would highly recommend. The next one was my second Emily Henry book, and that is Happy Place. So this is another contemporary romance, but this time we follow Harriet and Wynne. They were together. They were engaged, and then they broke up. Now, they have the same friend group, and this friend group goes on vacations every summer to this lake house that one of the friends' family owns. Except Wynne and Harriet did not tell their friends that they split up. And so it was decided that Harriet's going to go on this specific vacation. And much to her surprise, Wynne is there when she gets there, and he's pretending like they haven't broken up. And so this is a fake dating, sort of. And because they don't want to ruin the trip by telling their friends they're not together anymore. So they just pretend to be together. It's pretty good, I'm not going to lie. So this one I gave 4.25 stars. I think that's a little bit controversial almost, or just unpopular because people loved this book. And don't get me wrong, I loved this book. Just not as much as Beach Read, okay? What can I tell you? But it's so good. Emily Henry writes such a good romance. I don't even remember if there's smut in this one. If there is, it's again very, very, very minimal and just not really all that memorable, clearly. To be honest, if there's smut, I try to block out most of it. But it's, again, with little to no smut, that's a plus. That's a thumbs up from me. Again, banter was really good. The dynamics, the friends were good too. It was just, yeah, it was a fun time. Again, would definitely recommend. Pretty much anything Emily Henry writes, I'm going to recommend. So that's Happy Place. So I went on a little bit of a reread kick at the end of December, and that melted into the beginning of January and then kind of stopped after that. And so one of my last January rereads was The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. This is the last book in the Percy Jackson The Olympian series. Because it's the last book, I'm not going to tell you what it's about because you should have read this already, okay? This is an amazing series. It never gets old. It is technically middle grade fantasy, but it's just so good. I'm 21. I was 20 when I reread it. I've reread this series probably 4 times since I read it for the first time. It's so good. It's so good. I love this. It helped because the Percy Jackson Disney Plus show, I was making sure to reread and just like imagining everything that could happen and be like, oh, I love this. Sure, did I know what was going on 100% of the time? Pretty much, but that didn't stop me from still enjoying it again. Because it's a reread, I did not rate it, but if I'm going to be honest, like this is a 4.75 star probably, or a 5 star. The Percy Jacksons are all kind of within that range. So yeah, I read this, I think, for the first time when I was like 12. So right at the age that was kind of perfect for this. And so I grew up with it. I reread it so many times. It doesn't get old. And I love it so much. It still holds up 100%. So if you have not read this series, get on it. It needs to happen because it's so, so good. Last Olympian. Read it. The last book I read in January was another reread, and that was The Mark of Athena, which is the third book in the Heroes of Olympus series, which is the sequel to Percy Jackson and the Olympians, again by Rick Riordan. So, again, because it's in the middle of the series and it's part of a sequel series, I won't tell you what it's about. But again, if you haven't read it, go read that series. Mark of Athena is probably my second favorite book of the series. House of Hades is by far my first. It's the best one by a long shot. So technically it's middle grade fantasy, but I could almost put it into YA because they're 17 and so the character's a little bit older. But still, it's so good. The sequel series I haven't read as much as PJO, but it's still really, really good. It's like Percy Jackson, that whole universe holds my heart. And just like it literally is probably some of my favorite series of all time. All time, okay? Again, holds up, so good. I love Perciveth. That's it. And that is January. So let's move on to February. So in February, I read 7 books, a little bit more. So the first one I read in February was Collide by Bal Cabra. This is a college hockey romance, and it was on Kindle Unlimited. So we follow Summer, and she gets kind of like a placement or an internship of sorts to finish up her sports psychology degree or final project or something. That part always confused me. And she gets placed with the hockey team, except she has a burning hatred for hockey, and she does not want to be put on the hockey team at all. She's like, get me out of here, put me somewhere else, anywhere else. I don't want to be here. But she's forced to do the work for the hockey team. And we follow Aiden, who's the captain of said hockey team, and he gets forced to do the project, kind of be Summer's little guinea pig of sorts after something bad happened with the team. Do I remember what it was? No, because it wasn't all that memorable. And so we follow them. It it like it's pretty predictable for a sports romance and specifically a hockey romance. I gave it 3 stars. Definitely, as per usual in a hockey romance, after the 50% mark, it gets to be a lot of smut, which I didn't love. I was like, okay, I'm kind of over it. But like it was fine, I guess. Like I just don't remember really anything about it, to be fair. So, yeah. That was Collide. Maybe if you really like hockey romances, you'll like it. But I enjoy a hockey romance, and I didn't like this one that much. Or like it was okay. So, yeah, that's Collide. The next book I read in February was Book Lovers by Emily Henry, another contemporary romance by Emily Henry. And this is, for the most part, it's most people's favorites, and I understand why. So we follow Nora, who is a literary agent living in New York, and she goes on a trip with her sister Libby to this small town that is the main setting in one of her clients' biggest books. And so she goes there with her sister. When she gets there, she finds out that a book editor that she had met in New York but didn't like, she found him annoying and just not great, and she didn't give the best first impression either. That's actually his hometown, and so that is Charlie, who is the main love interest, which you pretty much figure out right away. So they don't like each other that much, to say the least, but Nora knows that this client needs an editor for this next book, and so she asks Charlie to edit it with her. And yeah, so they work through the summer on just like editing this book and, and romance things in a small town. So I gave it 4.25 stars. It's same as Happy Place. It's so good. I loved Book Lovers for sure. Like Emily Henry just knows how to write a romance. She does them so well. Again, dynamics are so good. The banter was good. Libby, oh, what a sweetheart. Was she a little bit, oh, yes. But we love Libby. She was great. Again, little to no smut, which is always a plus. It was just a fun, flirty time. I thoroughly enjoyed myself reading this. So, again, would highly recommend. And that is Book Lovers. After Book Lovers, I read Night Shift by Annie Crown. This was a Kindle Unlimited read, and it is a college sports romance. So we follow Kendall, who works the night shift at her college's library. We follow Vincent, who I don't know if he's the captain of the basketball team or not, but he's just really, really good at basketball. And he comes in one night and asks her for a recommendation for a paper, I think, that he's trying to write. And we kind of just follow them. That's really about it. I gave it 2.5 stars. It wasn't good, really. I didn't really enjoy it. Like, the only reason it's considered a sports romance is because Vincent plays basketball, but I don't know that Kendall even ever attends a basketball game. I don't know if we ever see Vincent play. Like, it just, that part of it seemed weird to me. I didn't like their relationship either. Thought that was, I just didn't like their chemistry. I don't know. It just wasn't that good. And then it just felt like nothing was happening. It was a quick read, so I'll give it that. But it just wasn't for me. Lots of smut for the most part. It just, I didn't enjoy it. So that's all I'm going to give time to for Night Shift. After that, I read Offside by Avery Keelan. This is another college hockey romance, and it was another Kindle Unlimited. I went on a trip in February, and so I just zoomed through a bunch of Kindle reads that I had saved and hadn't gotten around to. So that's kind of where a bunch of these are coming from. But this one, we follow Bailey, who gets dumped by her boyfriend, who is the captain of her college's hockey team, on her 21st birthday. So that's pretty crappy on his part, not gonna lie. And then she pretty much immediately rebounds with her ex's nemesis on her college's rival hockey team. So, and then it just follows that. I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it 3.25 stars. It was fine, sort of. Like, again, there was just a lot of smut, but like some of the characters were weird. Like, her ex is horrible and he's manipulative and just no good. And then there's this girl that likes Chase, who is her rebound, who's super weird, and that's a whole thing. I don't know. It sometimes it felt like so much was happening, and that sometimes it's like nothing was happening. It was a weird read. Again, it was like a quick read, but it wasn't one that I particularly enjoyed. So that's Offside. Next up is Five Survive by Holly Jackson. This is my first Holly Jackson read. I haven't read anything else by her. I'm waiting for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder to not have a 4-month wait time on Libby. So it may be a while. But this is a YA thriller. We follow Red with her friends. There's 5 more. So it's a total of 6. So guess what has to happen? It's a thriller. They're going on a trip. Not sure where they're going, but they are all in an RV. When in the middle of the night, they get stuck in the woods because they follow the GPS. No one had signal, so that they were going the wrong way. And then there's a shooter, and he made the RV have a flat tire, and so they're stuck there in the middle of the night with no service, nothing, and a shooter outside, which is dangerous. This shooter wants a secret to be revealed from within this group, and all 6 of them have a secret or multiple that could be what the shooter wants, and they're not leaving until the shooter gets what he wants, is kind of what is the deal. Like I said, it was my first Holly Jackson read. I had a good time for the most part. I'll be honest, the first 60%, I was vaguely interested. and then things after that started to slowly pick up. And the last like 15-20% of the book was wild, and I was fully invested at that point. Like I was like, what is happening? Oh my gosh, what's going on? So I gave it a 3.75 stars purely for that. Also, I didn't like pretty much any of the characters. The only character that I actually liked was Red's love interest. I feel like his name was Arthur. Editor Kira will let you know if it was Arthur or not. He was pretty much the only character I liked. Everyone else kind of sucked. Red especially. Red got on my nerves. She clearly is so not in a good headspace and so not there. And it's like, in theory, that should be interesting, but it just kind of got on my nerves, if I'm going to be honest. I did enjoy it, which makes me excited for Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I'm excited to read that at some point. And then she came up with a new book, The Reappearance of Rachel Price, which also sounds super interesting. And so I'd like to read that one as well. But if you are looking for a YA thriller, this definitely is a good one to go with. It was a good time, so I would recommend Five Survive. After that, I read Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is a YA contemporary romance. So this one, we follow Liz, and she is the daughter of a romance screenwriter, but her mom has died, and she then pretty much has this idea that she needs to have this picture-perfect, movie-esque relationship, happy ending, in kind of in order to just honor her mom in her mom's memory. And then we follow Wes, who is her next door neighbor, and she will tell you that he's her enemy. They aren't really enemies. They fight over a parking space, and that's about the extent of it. But this plot really starts going when Michael, this guy she had a huge crush on when they were kids, moved back to town. So they had left years ago, and he was coming back to finish senior year. She's like, this is it. This is picture perfect. He is amazing. This is who mom would want me to be with. And in order to kind of get his attention, she and Wes decide to fake date. You can guess what happens from there. So it's like enemies to lovers, except of course, Wes isn't really her enemy ever. I wouldn't even call it rivals. It is what it is. But it's fake dating, which is super fun. Did I predict how the book would end from the very beginning? 100% I did. I watched way too many rom-coms not to predict that. But I was still smiling, giggling, kicking my feet the whole time. Literally, I was like, there were times I was like trying not to laugh out loud. It was just so good. I loved them. Wes and Liz were amazing. Love them. So yeah, I would highly recommend Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. There's another book of hers I read later on in the year, and I will talk about that when I get there. But pretty much anything she writes, I'm going to kind of be on board with. So that's Better Than the Movies. By the way, Better Than the Movies got a 4-star. Pretty sure I did not mention that. The last book I read in February was The Rural Diaries, Love, Livestock, and Big Life Lessons Down on Mischief Farm by Hilary Burton Morgan. This is her memoir. I don't rate memoirs. I feel like that's rude and wrong. That's just my personal opinion. It's just, they're talking about their life, and it feels really bad of me to like put a star rating on it. So that's just my opinion. Go ahead and rate memoirs all you want. That's fine. That's your business, not mine. So Hilary writes about her time on One Tree Hill, her relationship with her now husband, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. She talks about infertility, parenting, and then this move to a small town in upstate New York and buying Mischief Farm. I originally kind of was drawn to it because I love One Tree Hill. It's my favorite show of all time. And I knew that her time there was not great for a large majority of it, especially near the end of it. And it was interesting to see, I was just interested to see what she would write about it. And so, like, she did touch on One Tree Hill. It was a big part of her life, but I found myself being interested in most of the aspects of her life and not just tuning out whenever she didn't talk about One Tree Hill. It was just fun. We get to learn that she had a relationship with the Rudds, which is super cool, and just like learning about this small town that they lived in, and just this change from living in the city and living in LA and New York and moving onto a farm and then getting to see kind of like how that all works. I will say this book definitely, if you're gonna read it, I would look up trigger warnings. She does talk about infertility, and that's a big part of her story that was really, really heartbreaking. So please go look that up. There are other trigger warnings you should probably look up just in case. But it was a good memoir. But yeah, definitely look up trigger warnings, but would recommend overall. Now we move on to March. In March, I read 4 books. 4 books. The first one, I finished off the Emily Henry Canon. The Emily Henry canon up until the point, at this point. I have not read that funny story. It's a several month wait time. It's going to be a while. So, The People We Meet on Vacation was the next one I read. It is another contemporary romance. It's what she writes. She knows what she's good at. She keeps on it. So this one we follow Poppy and Alex. They are best friends. They met in college and they go on vacations together, summer vacations. At the time when they first met and when they first started it, Poppy was doing these like vacation on a budget kind of things and how to travel light or how to get a good time out of a trip with spending little money as possible. But as the summers go on, she gets hired onto this travel magazine and things get a little bit different. And ultimately, her and Alex have a big falling out and they do not talk. So we meet up with her and she's not doing so great. She's in a rut. She's not in a great headspace, nothing. And so she decides to take some time off work and she decides, you know what, we're going to reach out to Alex and see if he wants to go on a vacation with me. And so she reaches out and he says, sure. And so they go. And from there you can guess what kind of happens. So this one I gave 4 stars. It is my least favorite of the Emily Henry books, but that does not mean it's not a good book. It is a good book. I also think it was her first book that she wrote, at least her first romance. That I'm not 100% on, but it was still very good. It's a friends to lovers, which is a mixed bag for me. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't love it. This time I liked it for the most part. Something that's interesting about this book is that it jumps timelines. So we'll jump from present summer to 10 summers ago, to present summer to 8 summers ago kind of deal. And so at the same time as we're seeing them rekindle their relationship, we're also seeing the reason why their friendship broke in the first place. And so it's just like Poppy will tell you about stuff and like how her and Alex have not talked in 2 years and all this and that. And like, it's all because of that summer in Croatia. And the reader's like, what happened in Croatia? Why don't we know anything? We don't find out what happened in Croatia until over halfway through the book, which in essence is fine. It's kind of a mystery in that sense of like kind of figuring out, but you kind of already know why or like what happened sort of in Croatia just from like the vibes that she's talking about. But that was a little confusing at times. All this to say, I still had a good time with it. It definitely is it the smuttiest of them? It's the smuttiest that I remember of it. There's for sure one scene that is smutty. But the thing with Emily Henry is that when she writes smut, it's not graphic, which is great. And it's not 30 pages. It's like 2 pages max, it feels like. So that's a great plus. We love that. So People We Meet on Vacation would definitely recommend. It is Emily Henry, so I'm going to recommend everything she writes. Moving on. The next book I read was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So this is a science fiction, but some places also classify this as a thriller. I wouldn't, so I'm just going to say it's a science fiction. This follows Wade, and he lives in the year 2045, where everybody spends most of their time and money in what's kind of described as a VR setup, like video game called the Oasis. It's like literally everyone lives there. Most people don't even care about being outside of the Oasis. So the creator of the Oasis, James Halliday, dies, and he, in his will, says that the person who will inherit his entire fortune, as well as gain complete control of the Oasis, is the player to find his Easter egg in the Oasis. And so we follow Wade, who is what they call a gunter, which is short form for egg hunter, trying to find Easter egg along with some of his friends in the Oasis. The reason I read this book was because I really love the movie. It's weirdly a comfort watch for me. I don't know why. And I just wanted to see the differences. It's one of my favorite things, just to kind of read a book and watch a movie or a show or whatever the adaptation is, just to kind of find the differences and analyze from there. And I will say the differences are pretty much immediate. It's like it's from the start of the book, a bunch of things are different, which I understand. Like the book itself has a lot going on, and I can see the reasons why they changed a bunch of the material for the movie, but it's still a great book. I gave it 4 stars. I had a fun time with it. It was a good book, but I think I would choose the movie, which is definitely an unpopular opinion, but it is what it is. It felt kind of slow at times. I read this on audiobook, and I remember seeing how long it was. It was like a 15-hour read, and that was kind of daunting. I did speed it up, so it wasn't that long, but it's not even a super long book. Like, it's just, I don't know. It was still a good time. I thoroughly enjoyed myself while reading it. But yeah, I would recommend Ready Player One, even if you didn't like, especially if you didn't like the movie, then check out the book because there's a lot of differences between them. So that's Ready Player One, would highly recommend. The next book I read was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a YA mystery, and it is the first of the Inheritance Games trilogy. Oh, is it a trilogy now? It's technically a series. I don't know. It's whatever. So we have Avery. She is the main inheritor of billionaire Tobias Hawthorne's entire fortune, and she has no blood relation to him. Nothing. Like, when I mean she's the main inheritor, she is the main inheritor. He left a ring to one of his daughters. He left a compass to his other daughter. And to his 4 grandsons, he left them like 50 grand each. Oh, and then his 2 daughters, he also gave them enough money to pay off their debts. And so it literally, like, she gets everything pretty much. And she has no idea why. It's a complete mystery. Everyone wants to know why. She is the one that inherits everything, and he just like disowned his entire family. And so she works towards solving this mystery of why she was the one he chose. She gets some help mainly from 2 brothers, 2 of the Hawthorne brothers, Grayson and Jameson. A little bit of help from Xander, but Nash could not care less. Nash is like, whatever do you, I'm not involved. And eventually they figure out what it is. Yeah, that is that. So I gave it 3.5 stars, and honestly, I would probably raise it up to 3.75. It was a pretty good book. I definitely enjoyed it. It's kind of giving Knives Out, but Knives Out is 100 times better because Knives Out is amazing. It's so good. It was just, yeah, for the most part, it was good. There's a love triangle with Grayson and Jameson and Avery, and honestly, I don't really love it. I don't really love either brother. I think, but of the brothers, they're definitely the 2 best for her, I guess. I don't know. That is the whole thing that I'm still not 100% sure on it. But in all honesty, this family's just weird and insane. Like, I don't understand. They're super rich, so maybe that's why they decide to just do whatever. I don't know. They're weird, but yeah. I'll give it 3.75. And honestly, you don't have to read after this. It's fine enough to just read as a standalone. I did read the second one, and I'll probably read the third one. And I've heard garbage things about the fourth one, so maybe I won't read that one. But yeah, I don't know. It's 3.75. I guess I would probably recommend just like it's a good YA mystery. It does what it's supposed to. So yeah, that's the Inheritance Games. And the last book I read in March was Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is a YA science fiction book, and it's the first of the Illuminae Files series, but I won't be continuing the series, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So we follow Katie and Ezra. They live in the year 2575, and they don't live on Earth. They live on a different planet, but they supposedly look like humans. I don't entirely understand that part. That's fine though. In this book, there are kind of two mega corporations. Do I remember either of their names? No. But one of them attacks Katie and Ezra's planet and basically sets off an entire like disease that makes the people it's something else for sure. And then they full on just attack the place. So Katie and Ezra are exes. They had broken up kind of recently from what it sounds like in the book. And they end up finding each other on their way to just kind of get to a place where they can get rescued because the other big corporation decides to come help, which is good on them. They end up getting separated at some point in their run for safety, and they end up on two different ships in this fleet of 3 ships. So things are supposedly fine, except weird things are happening and leadership is covering it up. And so Katie is trying to find out what's going on. Now, so I gave it 3.5 stars, and the main reason why is because when I listened to it on audiobook, it was a full production. Like, this wasn't a narrator narrating thoughts and dialogue. This was like you had a different person voicing every character, and you had sound effects, and that was really cool. It was almost like listening to an audio series rather than listening to an audio book. Any of you know about the Royals of Malibu, like podcast of sorts on Spotify? It's giving that, is what it's giving. That just came to me now. And I was like, oh, should I mention it? Sure, I'll mention it, whatever. But the thing that was it was a little bit hard to follow. And the reason why is because it's not structured in chapters. It is structured up into files. So sometimes you'll get chats, like online chats between Katie and Byron, who is someone who's helping her kind of figure out what's going on, or Katie and Ezra, or whoever, and Ezra and some of his buddies. And then sometimes it'll be audio recordings from an interrogation, and sometimes it'll be someone and analyzing security footage and them just telling you what's going on. So in that sense, it's a little bit confusing, and you have to pay attention kind of to dates because there's always a date before each of the files. And so that was a little bit hard to follow at times. But the reason I won't be continuing is because the other books in the series don't even follow Katie and Ezra. They follow other characters in the same events as Illuminae, and I don't care enough. They're characters we've never met, or maybe we have met and I just don't remember. And they're just pretty much recounting what happened with them. And I just didn't care enough, so I won't be continuing. The end of the book was weird. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I really liked Katie and Ezra, but they're the only characters I liked in the entire book. So yeah, it's 3.5 stars. Sure, like if you like a sci-fi, it's a good one, and especially listen to it audiobook. I wonder if I would have a very different opinion if I read it physically, but audiobook, it was really fun. I remember seeing this book in my public library, in my school library, and I just never picked it up, and I just needed something to read. And I was like, you know what? I'll finally get to it. And you know what? I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. So that is Illuminae. Now we're on to our last month, April, and I read 4 books in April. The first being An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a YA fantasy, and it is the first in the Ember in the Ashes series. And we follow Laya, who is, in this world, she is a scholar, and scholars are basically a race of people who, in the Martial Empire, are looked down upon. They often get sold into slavery and arrested. It's just a mess. They have no power, no authority, anything. And they get raided all the time, too. And so one day during a raid in her hometown, her area of town, her brother gets arrested for having a journal with drawings of these special swords, and he is accused of working with the Scholar Resistance. So because of this, Laia goes to the Scholar Resistance and is like, "You gotta get my brother out of jail." And they're like, "We won't do that unless you do something for us." And that's where we kind of meet Elias. He's a marshal, which means he is like the race of people that's in charge of this whole thing. And he went to Blackcliff, which is the training school for the martial army, made out of people called masks. And they are called masks because they wear silver masks on their face. Now he hates it. He's in his last he's pretty much almost out of there. He is supposed to graduate, and that's when I think of them like monks or maybe oracles. I'm not entirely sure what they are because I can't remember their names. That one of them comes and is like, "We are going to have some trials to find out who the next emperor will be." Now, this is a big thing because the current emperor is still alive. So it is Elias, his best friend Helene, and then Marcus and Marcus's brother, who are all participating in the trials. And you have to win 2 trials to become the emperor. You have to win 1 trial to be the emperor's, kind of like vizier. They're called, it has a special name and I can't remember what it is. I don't remember. Editor Kira, the name of that thing. And otherwise you die. It's kind of the whole thing. And so that's the reason that Laia is going to spy, is to figure out stuff about the trials themselves for the resistance. And there Elias and Laia meet. Laia is there disguised as a slave, which is not great for a girl. In this school, they often get essayed. So not a fun time. Laia is having a rough go there for sure. So I gave this book 4 stars. It's a great start to the series for sure. The world building was really cool. I liked the magic system, and even the politics I found interesting. I'm not usually big into the politics, but this time I actually was intrigued at times. The characters were pretty good for the most part. I didn't love Helene, and then Marcus is just he is described as one of the worst human beings on this planet, and that makes you hate his guts, which is perfect for his character. So that's great. I love Elias. Laia's pretty good. The resistance is something else. I don't know. It's just the characters are good, and I really enjoyed the book as a whole. And so I would definitely recommend An Ember in the Ashes. The next one I read was A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in the Ember in the Ashes series. And because it's the second, I won't spoil anything and I won't tell you anything about it, because you got to read the first one to figure out what happens in the second one. This one I gave 3.75 stars. I didn't like it as much as the first one. They added Helene's POV, which in essence is actually pretty good because it gave us perspective on what's happening outside of Laia and Elias, because it's something very different. But I don't love Helene as a character, especially in the second book. I found her more irritating than in the first. And so it just was I wasn't a huge fan, and just that added a little bit of trying to follow the plot. Timing was weird too. They are traveling a bunch. It was hard to follow sometimes. So this one, I will say, definitely ended more if you didn't want to continue, you could probably leave it after this one and you would be fine. I'll probably continue it. It's just right now, I don't know if I want to finish it, or if I have it, I'll definitely finish the series, but right now it's not on a high priority list, if you know what I mean. So that was A Torch Against the Night. The next one is a little bit of a complicated one, and that is The Siren by Kiera Cass. So technically, I've read this book before, but when I picked it up, I forgot I had read it. And so it's a reread, but on a reread, I DNF'd it. I didn't continue it. So this is a YA fantasy romance, a romantasy, if you will. We follow Colin, and Colin is from the 1920s, and she gets saved by the ocean and becomes a siren for her. And when you become a siren, you pretty much will serve the ocean for 100 years, and then you get released back, but with no memories, and you don't age during that time. So we meet back up with Colin. I think she's 90 years into her sentence. She's probably got like 10, maybe it's 95. She's pretty close to ending her servitude to the ocean. And she is living in Miami with a couple of other sirens. And this is where she meets a Kinley. And he goes to one of the colleges in Miami. And when they meet, Colin will not speak to him. And we find out that sirens are not allowed to use their voice until the ocean says so, because their voice pretty much means death will come to the person who hears it. So she signs, she will write on paper so that they can communicate, all that good stuff. And it's that. It's a Kinley and Colin. And Colin goes through a lot of mental turmoil on what to do about this whole thing. So on a first read, I really enjoyed it. I remember I read it pretty quickly. I finished it in a short period of time. But on that reread, I just could not get into it. I didn't care about the characters. I liked a Kinley, and that was about it. It didn't grab my attention on a reread. So that was like, I love Hero Cast. I love the selection series, still do, because it is reality TV show garbage, and I'm here for it. It's The Bachelor, but if The Bachelor was actually a good person, because Prince Max in his life, okay? This one is an interesting concept, but I don't know if it was executed in a way where I could go back and reread it 100 times. It's one of those where, like, on a first read, you're kind of done. So, yeah, that's The Siren. The last book I read in May was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is another one of her YA contemporary romances. And with this one, we follow Emily. And Emily wakes up. It's Valentine's Day. She's excited. She's super excited to see her boyfriend, all that good stuff. But the day turns out to be a dumpster fire. It doesn't start well. She crashes into Nick, her chemistry lab partner, on the road, and he has to give her a ride to school. And then she has to see her boyfriend kiss another girl. It's a mess. It's a mess. And she ends up going to stay at her grandmother's house for the night. Except the next morning, she wakes up in her own bed, and it's still February 14th. So it's a time loop book. And so here we get to see her relive this same disastrous Valentine's Day over and over again. And she just tries to change it and somehow make it better. But that's this. Nick very clearly is the love interest right off the bat. So it's like there's no point in even trying to hide that fact. She feels very drawn to him. And they kind of get to know each other through these. Well, she gets to know him through these repeated Valentine's Days. But yeah, it was super fun. I give it 4 stars. I don't know why, but for some reason, I've been catching these time loop things and they come at me with a shock. Like, I watched 2 movies last year, which were high ranked movies. I thought they were so fun. We had Palm Springs and the map of Tiny Perfect Things. Both were great, and I had such a good time with those. Those were such good surprises. And honestly, I should have figured out this was a time loop. I should mention, I go into books pretty much knowing nothing of what the plot is for the most part. That includes this, and I should have caught on from the title that this was a time loop, but I didn't. And so another time loop that caught me by surprise, but I had a good time. Again, kicking my feet, giggling, smiling, all the good things. It was predictable, yes, but I still had a great time with it. So I would definitely recommend The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. There's one more of hers I haven't read yet, and that's Betting on You, I think is what it's called. And that's definitely on my list of things to read. She has, I think, a young adult or like an adult romance coming out in the next year and a half or something, which that will also definitely get read because I've decided I love Lynn Painter. So that's it for my wrap up. That is it. That is my January to April reading wrap up. I am excited for May. I already have read 11 books in May, so that definitely motivates me to do a monthly wrap up rather than waiting so long, because if I wait another 3-4 months, that video is going to be like 2 hours because I'm going to have so many books. So maybe I'll do monthly wrap-ups, especially for the summer, because I can get through a book pretty much in a work shift. And so that might be what happens. But anyways, let me know down below some of the books you've read so far this year, any reading recommendations you have, all that good stuff. I will link a couple of BookTubers that got me into reading if you're interested in getting some reading recommendations and watching their reading vlogs and their wrap-ups as well. I'll link them down below. But yeah, like and subscribe. Like the video if you did. Like it if you didn't. Doesn't hurt you, just helps me. So yeah, I'm hoping to get into a more consistent schedule. That, again, that's a hope, not a promise. So if you want to kind of just be updated on when I upload, turn the bell on for notifications, and that's it, I think. So I'll see you next time in Kiara's Corner.